The year was 1933. America was on its knees. The Great Depression had gripped the nation, a silent, creeping despair that emptied pockets and broke spirits. Dust storms swirled across the heartland, turning farms into barren wastelands. In the cities, long lines snaked around corners, filled with men who once had jobs, who once had pride, now waiting for a bowl of soup, for a piece of bread. They were good people, hard-working people, but the system had failed them. Their life savings, tucked away, in banks they were told to trust, had vanished. Poof, gone. The doors were locked, the money was gone, and no one was held accountable. It was a time of deep, simmering anger. And in that anger something shifted. The lines between right and wrong began to blur. Who was the real criminal? Was it the desperate man who stole a loaf of bread to feed his family? Or was it the banker in a fine suit who gambled away the town's savings and walked away without a scratch? People started to look at the world differently. They saw the banks not as pillars of the community, but as the enemy. The government, which seemed powerless to help, wasn't far behind. There was a hunger for justice, any kind of justice, even if it came from the barrel of a gun. It was the perfect stage, you see, for a new kind of outlaw to make his entrance. He wasn't your typical thug. No, he was something else. He was charming, handsome, and bold. He walked into those hated banks with a confident swagger and a Thompson submachine gun. He didn't just take the money, he did it with a flair that captured the public's imagination. In an era of faceless corporations and untouchable institutions, he put a face to the fight. He was a man taking on the very system that had crushed so many. For some, he was a dangerous criminal, a menace to society, but for others, for the disenfranchised and the forgotten, he was a hero, a modern-day Robin Hood. His name was John Dillinger. And so his story began, a story that would become a legend. It was a tale of stolen fortunes and daring escapes, of fast cars and deadly shootouts. The newspapers couldn't get enough of him, splashing his face across every front page. He was public enemy number one, a title that only seemed to make him more famous, more mythic. He was the man the police couldn't catch, the ghost who slipped through their fingers time and time again. He lived his life on the run, a life that was as thrilling as it was short. It was a life that could only have happened then, in that specific moment of American desperation, a perfect storm of circumstance, and John Dillinger was right in the middle of it. Before the screaming headlines and the bank vaults, there was just a boy. John Herbert Dillinger was born on an Indiana farm in 1903. He grew up like many boys of his time, in a world that seemed simple enough on the surface, but there was a restlessness in him, a spark of rebellion that his strict father couldn't tame. He was known for his charisma, his easy smile, but also for a mischievous streak that often led to trouble, petty theft, fights, a general disregard for authority. He quit school and joined the Navy, hoping for adventure, but that didn't last either. He found military life too rigid, too confining for his wild spirit. He was adrift, a young man looking for his place. That search led him down a dark path. In 1924, in a clumsy, poorly planned robbery, he and a friend assaulted a local grocer. It was a foolish crime, and it cost him dearly. His accomplice's father, a local official, helped his son get a light sentence. But Dillinger, who had a less than perfect reputation, was advised to plead guilty. He was told he would get leniency. Instead, the judge threw the book at him. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in the Indiana State Prison. He was just 21 years old. The heavy iron doors slammed shut behind him, and the boy who walked in would not be the same man who walked out. Prison was a brutal school, a university of crime. It was here that Dillinger's bitterness toward the system hardened into a cold, calculated resolve. He felt betrayed by the justice system that had promised him fairness and delivered a crushing sentence. He spent his days learning from the masters, the most experienced bank robbers and hardened criminals in the state. Men like Harry Pete Pierpont and Charles Mackley. They taught him everything: how to plan a heist, how to crack a safe, how to handle a weapon, how to anticipate the police. His natural charisma and intelligence made him an excellent student. He was no longer a lost boy. He was becoming a professional. When John Dillinger was finally paroled in May of 1933, after nearly 9 years behind bars, he was a changed man. The farm boy was gone, replaced by a hardened criminal with a plan. The world outside had changed too. The Great Depression was in full swing, and the banks he had heard so much about were weaker and more hated than ever. He had the skills, he had the connections he made in prison, and he had a burning desire for revenge against the society that had locked him away. He wasn't just going to rob banks for the money, he was going to make a statement. The stage was set for the beginning of his infamous crime spree. Almost immediately after his release, Dillinger put his prison education to work. He didn't waste a moment. He assembled a crew, many of them the very men he had met behind bars. The Dillinger gang was born. Their methods were a shock to the system. They were fast, efficient, and surprisingly professional. They would case a bank for days, learning the routines of the staff and the layout of the building. Then, they would strike with military precision, bursting through the doors, brandishing their machine guns. They took control in seconds. One member would handle the crowd, another would vault over the counter, while a third stood guard. They were in and out in minutes, disappearing in a fast getaway car before the police even knew what happened. The public's reaction was something no one expected. In a time when people felt helpless, watching their life savings disappear into the vaults of failed banks, Dillinger's actions didn't always look like a crime. To many, it looked like payback. He was taking from the institutions that had taken so much from them. Stories, some true and some embellished, began to circulate. Tales of Dillinger burning mortgage records, freeing people from their debts, or how he would only take the bank's money, sometimes even giving a few dollars back to a stunned customer. He was seen as a folk hero, a man with a certain code of honor, fighting a one-man war against a corrupt system. The newspapers fueled this growing legend. Dillinger was good copy. He was handsome, dressed sharply, and had a defiant smirk that photographers loved. His exploits sold papers by the thousands. Each robbery was more daring than the last, and his name became a household word. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a celebrity. People followed his story like a thrilling movie serial, waiting for the next chapter. He played his part perfectly, posing for pictures with a wooden gun or flashing a charming smile for the cameras. He understood the power of the media, and he used it to build his own myth, to craft the image of the gentleman bandit. Of course, the reality was far more brutal. The Dillinger gang's robberies were not bloodless affairs. Police officers were killed, and innocent bystanders were caught in the crossfire. The money they stole didn't go to the poor. It funded their lavish lifestyle on the run. They were violent criminals, not crusaders. But in the desperate climate of the 1930s, people chose to see what they wanted to see. They saw a man who was beating the system, who was living free while everyone else was trapped. The line between fact and fiction blurred, and the legend of John Dillinger grew larger than the man himself, casting a long shadow across the American landscape. If robbing banks made John Dillinger famous, his ability to escape from jail made him a legend. He seemed to possess an almost supernatural talent for slipping through the grasp of the law. It started not long after his crime spree began. He was captured in Ohio, but his gang didn't abandon him. Disguised as officers, they walked into the Lima jail, shot the sheriff, and freed their leader. This brazen act sent a clear message. John Dillinger could not be held. He was always one step ahead, a ghost in the machine of law enforcement. His escapes were as meticulously planned and daringly executed as his bank robberies, further cementing his reputation as an untouchable outlaw. His most famous escape, the one that truly embarrassed the authorities and captivated the nation, took place in March 1934. Dillinger was being held in what was billed as the escape-proof county jail in Crown Point, Indiana. It was a fortress of steel and concrete, guarded by a small army of police and National Guardsmen. The authorities paraded him before the cameras, confident they had finally caged their man. The local prosecutor proudly posed with his arm around Dillinger, a moment of hubris he would soon regret. The nation believed that public enemy number one was finally, securely, behind bars for good. They were wrong. The story of what happened next became instant folklore. According to the legend, Dillinger carved a fake gun from a block of wood, or maybe a bar of soap, and blackened it with shoe polish. Using this convincing prop, he bluffed his way out, tricking the guards into opening his cell. He then locked them up, gathered weapons, and calmly walked out the front door. He didn't just escape, he stole the sheriff's brand new Ford V8, a powerful car, to make his getaway. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He had made a mockery of the escape-proof jail and the very people who had boasted of his capture. It was a humiliation of the highest order for law enforcement. This escape triggered a massive federal response. By driving the stolen sheriff's car across state lines from Indiana to Illinois, Dillinger had committed a federal offense. This officially brought him into the crosshairs of J. Edgar Hoover and his fledgling Bureau of Investigation. which would soon be renamed the FBI. Hoover, an ambitious and image-conscious director, saw Dillinger as both a threat and an opportunity. Capturing America's most wanted man would prove the necessity and effectiveness of his national police force. The chase was no longer a local affair, it was now a national priority. The full power of the United States government was about to come down on one man. With the FBI now leading the hunt, the net began to tighten around John Dillinger. J. Edgar Hoover assigned his top agent Melvin Purvis to head the Chicago office with one single overriding mission: get Dillinger. The manhunt intensified, turning into a relentless, nationwide pursuit. Close calls and bloody shootouts followed, like the infamous gun battle at the Little Bohemia Lodge in Wisconsin. FBI agents, acting on a tip, surrounded the resort where the gang was hiding. But the raid was a disaster. Agents opened fire on innocent civilians leaving a nearby tavern, and in the confusion, Dillinger and his men slipped away into the darkness once again. The failure was a public embarrassment for Hoover and only made him more determined. As the pressure mounted, Dillinger's world became smaller and smaller. He was the most famous face in America, which made hiding in plain sight nearly impossible. He underwent crude plastic surgery to alter his appearance and used acid to try to burn off his fingerprints, but he remained a marked man. His gang was crumbling, its members killed or captured one by one. Dillinger was increasingly isolated, forced to rely on a shrinking circle of contacts in the Chicago underworld. It was in this desperate state that he made a fatal mistake. He put his trust in the wrong person, a woman named Anna Sage. Anna Sage was a Romanian immigrant who ran a brothel in Chicago. She was also facing deportation. Seeing an opportunity, she contacted the FBI. She made them a deal. She would deliver John Dillinger, and in return, the government would let her stay in the country. Agent Melvin Purvis agreed. The plan was set for the night of July 22, 1926. Anna told the agents that she, Dillinger, and another woman would be going to see a gangster movie, Manhattan melodrama, at the Biograph Theater. To make sure the agents could identify her, she said she would be wearing a red dress. This detail, the woman in red, would become forever etched in the annals of crime history. That hot summer night, federal agents swarmed the area around the Biograph, hiding in doorways and pretending to be casual passers-by. As the movie ended and the crowd spilled onto the street, they watched and waited. Then they saw her, Anna Sage, in her brightly colored dress, with John Dillinger by her side. Purvis lit a cigar, the prearranged signal. As Dillinger walked past an alley, agents shouted his name. He knew instantly he was trapped. He reached for a gun in his pocket, but it was too late. A volley of shots rang out in the night air. John Dillinger, the outlaw who had defied America, fell dead on the pavement. His reign was over, but his legend was just beginning, leaving us to wonder. Was he just a criminal, or a symbol of a broken time?